So good evening, everyone. So this is an opportunity just to show off some of the recent acquisitions. And I think it's really interesting because for each of the trustee board meetings, we always provide a summary of some of the key acquisitions. And I keep thinking, well, it'd be great if more people saw some of the things that we are getting into the collection. We do try and highlight some, especially on social media. But also, this is a chance to sort of show them off a bit and also to talk about them a bit more. So we sort of have it in mind that we'll try and do this on a more regular basis as something that may be of interest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show an object. I'll talk about it a little bit, and then I'll hand over to you to ask any questions. So I've got a whole bunch of things which I suspect we won't be able to get through in the 3/4 of an hour or so, perhaps a bit longer, that I'll be chatting. But so we're going to start off with this. Oh, sorry. The other thing is that I've got two cameras connected to my computer. So I'll now change to the one that's for the close-up, so you don't have to look at my ugly mug, or more importantly, Stonehenge in the snow. So this is what you're looking at is a tray with that I use to show the objects. I've got a scale here which is 8 centimeters, and for ordinary mortals like me, a pound coin. So it gives you an idea of the sort of scale. I hope you can see that. And this is the first thing, which looks fairly unimpressive. But when we were installing some insulation in the loft above the Oxman Gallery, we had a whole lot of collections up there, actually, lots of geology, which is a bit weird because why would you have rocks up in the attic? But that's what we had. And then we were sorting through, sort of looking at the boxes very quickly to see what was there. And Will Partridge, who was working with us at the time on the Wealth of Knowledge project, opened up a box and found 3 of these, which look a bit unprepossessing. They look very exciting. So he opened them up and realized and saw that they are microscope slides. And at the top, you can see it says, "Section of Stonehenge rocks cut for the microscope." And he immediately said, that sounds quite interesting. Now, when you look at the slides as well, I'll hold one up. They all have, let's see if you might be able to see, if I hold, you might be able to see that, no, it doesn't really show very well. I ought to practice that. They actually have writing scratched on them, presumably with a diamond or something, or glass cutter or something, which says what they are. So the one I'm holding now says number 3. Stonehenge S35. Now, the number S35 is the stone at Stonehenge from which those samples were taken. So this is really quite interesting. The samples were taken by William Cunnington III in 1874 or something. And they were published then. They were also looked at again in the 1950s. And the observant of you, who have been very enthusiastic and looked at your new edition of WHAM, which hopefully has arrived with you, will see that the first paper in WHAM is actually is actually an account of looking at these slides, a paper by Rob Ixer. And amongst them, perhaps the most interesting one is this one, which is a slide for S71, and it says stump of obelisk. Now, what on earth was meant by obelisk? And the interesting thing is that this is a sample taken from the stump of a stone that was excavated by Cunnington. He obviously dug it up. but and was excavated again by Atkinson, but there's no existing sample of it. So this is the only sample we have, and it's now reburied. So to get another sample would mean excavating at Stonehenge, which, as I'm sure you all know, will be rather tricky. So it's been really useful because it's been because Roberts has been able to look at the thin section, look at the minerals, and been able to work out that I think it's one of the Craig Rossi Fellin stones, but he's been able to tie it in, which was otherwise was a stone that previously he couldn't tie into anything. So it's yet another incremental development on the analysis of the stones at Stonehenge. There's also a slice somewhere of the altar stone. There's a few other bits of that. And you may have seen in the press this week that it's been the Rob and Co have published another article which suggests that the altar stone is old red sandstone. So I packed it away a bit too early before you asked any question. Is old red sandstone, but not from South Wales, which is what people had previously thought, and that they're now going to start to look for the location that it may have come from. Okay, so that's sort of a brief outline of this as the first object. Just hand over to you in case there's anyone who would like to ask a question. So as I say, you can either open up your microphone or stick a question in the chat, whichever you prefer. Or not bother. I can move on to the next thing. That's a bit of a relief because I thought someone might ask me a really difficult question about the petrology, which I'm not sure I can answer. That's what Roberts is for. That's his job, to do all the difficult things. The next one, make sure I've got it on my list, and I have to show you the wrapping, the way that these are wrapped. So this is oh, sorry, wrong one. It's this one. Lisa, the curator, has done all the this is the standard packaging that she does for the objects, and I think they're a real work of art. So I haven't unwrapped anything before getting it out to show you. So this is quite fun. It's a Paleolithic hand axe, and this comes from Hewish near Pewsey, where it was donated by the finder in 2018. So I suspect many of you know that Paleolithic hand axes were not for chopping down trees. These are meat cleavers using for chopping up. I imagine you've hit an auroch over the head or deer or something, and you use one of these for chopping it into chunks so you can barbecue it, skinning it, that sort of thing. So really very fine Paleolithic hand axe, and it's many hand axes end up in the river gravels in the Thames Valley, where they've been really rolled about by the river. But this, as you can see, is really quite fresh. So this has not moved far at all from where it was struck, where it was used, and where it was found, where it was then found. So as a Paleolithic hand axe, these are really pretty well date to before the last ice age, somewhere between 500,000 and 250,000 years ago or thereabouts. They're also not made by modern humans, Homo sapiens, because we as Homo sapiens, we've only been around for 100,000 years or so. So they thought these were made not by Neanderthals, who were, of course, the species of humans before us, but by Homo heidelbergensis, named after Heidelberg in Germany, where the first human remains like it were found. So that's quite fun. Anyone want to ask any questions, or say they've got one in their on their mantelpiece or anything? Oh, and the other thing, actually, I should point out, is just to notice that it has a number on 2019.10. So that's the unique reference number. So every object in the museum has a unique reference number that ties it back to the information in the accession register about who gave it, and also in our database, which is then online. So this is in our online database. So Jill has said, was this an isolated find, and any others been found at Hewish? Good question. And it was an isolated find, and I don't think there's any other Paleolithic hand axes from Hewish itself. There's a couple from Salisbury Plain where they are that have again not moved very far. But for us, we've got most of the ones we have in the collection are from near Great Bedwin, where they're in river gravels, and also from down near Salisbury. And there's a large collection from the same site down at Milford. Yeah, Milford, which is in Salisbury Museum. Right, what shall we have next? I have to say, I'm lost in admiration for the way that Lisa packages things. So you see the dinky little box. And now as we're on to metalwork, I'll put some gloves on. And the reason for that is that your hand and your skin gives out oils, and those can be be very bad for metal objects. They can help tarnish and corrode them. I hope you can see these things okay on your screens. So I'll just lift it up to the camera. Make sure it will focus okay. So this is a little gold ring, but perhaps you can see that it's not complete. The ring doesn't go all the way around, but you can see there's a join, and you can see that the gold is sheet gold, and it's wrapped over a bronze core, and you can see how the bronze has corroded. So you can see the sort of green corrosion products from the bronze. So this is a late Bronze Age, what gets called a hair ring. Let me just turn to Lisa's notes. Penannular ring, she calls it. It's sometimes called hair rings. They're also called ring money, which because we don't really know what they're used for. The hair ring suggestion is clearly that you would be able to use this to sort of with a hair braid, but also you do find quite a few of them. So it is suggested that they may have been some sort of currency or represent something. I think we've got two others in the collection, if I remember rightly. So this is really very nice. This one was found in Ogbourne, St Andrew, and was reported through the Portable Antiquities Scheme. And very generously, it was the reward was waived by both the finder and the landowner. So that means that the scarce resources we have could go further in securing other objects for the collection. So it's really a very nice find. So again, any questions anyone would like to ask? See if I can, if I turn it, you can see the way that the gold sheet has sort of torn on the edge. Sometimes these are decorated with inside sort of what's the word? It's not engraved, embossed decoration, circular decoration. Oh, so Janice has said how old is it? So it's late Bronze Age, around about 1000 BC, 800 BC, something like that. So I shall put that away and I can tidy it up later. This is another tiny thing in a mini plastic bag. And again, this is another treasure find. And this again is from Ogborne St Andrew. And again, the finder and landowner both waived their reward. Again, this is terribly delicate. So I'm hoping the camera will focus there. Can you see it's a gold, literally a leaf made of gold, very thin sheet gold. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you can see the decoration of the veins on the gold sheet. So it's really very fine. How on earth the finder found it, I have no idea. So this comes from Ogborne St Andrew, and these are quite. There are a few of these that have been found, and the most likely is that this is Roman, and the ones like this made of gold and sometimes of silver found on votive sites, temples and shrines. They've been found in, where are we? Gloucestershire, Surrey, Suffolk, and Norfolk. So it's been suggested that these are on headdresses. So perhaps that of a priest or some high-ranking official. But obviously very fragmentary. I guess the finder was hoping to find the rest of it, but no success. It's gone back safely. Right. And then we'll move on slightly. Do I need to still know my... Actually, no. Think about it. Oh, there's one other thing I'll need, or two other things I need gloves for. So I'm going to do those first. This is one I haven't actually seen myself, so I'm quite looking forward to seeing this. As you can see, it is absolutely tiny. You can see that. So it's a sort of circular mount with a silver mount with a silver ring on it. And you might be able to see there's a little bit of decoration at the end. So this is what's called a verval. It's a hawking ring. And it's got a heraldic shield on the outer face, which shows a two-legged and winged creature, probably a wyvern. The wyvern, of course, is the symbol of Wessex, which is quite fun. But these were attached to the leather straps, which were fastened around the leg of the hawk, used to keep control of the bird when it was on the glove and when it was being trained. And it was a way of identifying who the bird belonged to. The shield matches the heraldic crest of William Herbert, the third Earl of Pembroke, who was at Wilton House in Salisbury. So it says here, this is the research by the Portable Antiquities Scheme. So he was a nobleman, politician, courtier. He served as Chancellor of the University of Oxford, and with King James I founded Pembroke College. 1608, he was appointed Warden of the Forest of Dean. 1609, Governor of Portsmouth, which he kept till his death. He was Lord Chamberlain from 1615 to 25. And in 1623, the first folio of Shakespeare's plays were dedicated to him and his brother. So this was found at Collingbourne, Kingston in 2016, which suggests that the party were out hunting. And it's tempting then to think about the hunting lodge, the King's Hunting Lodge, which was at Lugshaw Castle in the sort of slightly earlier period, but perhaps that was still their base for going hunting. So lovely find, fantastic association, and on just such a tiny thing that you can see the shield. So any questions while I put it away? Oh, and I see, sorry, there was a question from Catherine about the gold leaf. And the question was the gold sheet pressed onto the leaf? It's the way it was made is a sheet of gold sheet which was cut to shape and then embossed. So taking something quite sharp, which could have been something like a bird bone or sort of a bronze point, and then using that to impress the lines onto the gold sheet to make the veins of the leaf. And then last but not least, is this. So again, this is a treasure find. And what you can see is that this is a garnet in a gold frame, a gold mount with a suspension loop at the top. So this is Anglo-Saxon in date. It's garnet, which may well be Roman. Let me just double check my. Oh, which is almost certainly reused Roman one, and there is something in the surface which makes me wonder if it was engraved. This will date from the 6th century AD in the Saxon period. Now that's a really interesting period because, of course, that sort of opens with King Redwold being buried at Sutton Hoo, and it's that sort of the switch over from pagan to Christianity. This is the time when the Christian missionaries are steadily converting the English kings and kingdoms. We've got a necklace made of gems, rather like this, which was excavated in the 1850s from Roundway Down, where a woman was buried on a bed with a necklace of gems like this, and also a single coin that came from Central Gaul. She also had 2 pins linked by a gold chain at the center, an circular enamel boss that has a cross on it. And the suggestion is that she was an abbess, and that at the time, if you were female and of the royal line, you had really two choices. One was to get married or be married off, and the other was to become an abbess and take over I was going to say monastery. I forgot the name, nunnery. And it was quite common for women who were who had married and were widowed, for them then to become abbesses in later life once their husbands had popped off as a sort of retirement home, and they'd take over and live in a nunnery. And these sorts of the jewels like this are not common. There was a recent find of one in Northamptonshire with a square mount that was sort of reused from warrior's garb, if you like, from which really hit the headlines. So these are very unusual, probably showing royal status, and really is very significant. And you can also see at the back of it as well. So this comes from the Hull at Avington. I hope I've said that right, Karen. And is really quite an important find. And again, this was given to the museum by both the finder, whose name is Will Barton, and the landowner, who very generously waived their rewards to allow it to come to the museum, which is fabulous. We're so grateful. So that's a really special find. Does anyone have any questions about that one? No, put it safely back in its box. Right, I think I can take my gloves off now. Right. And this is slightly different, slightly more up to date. You can see why I don't need my hands anymore. I don't need my gloves anymore. Oh, sorry. The jewel I was just showing you from the Saxon jewel. What I forgot to say, this is in Lisa's notes, is that these jewels quite often are in burials, but it's worth remembering that in 670 the Pope said that people should not be buried with grave goods. So from the chances are that this dates to before 670. And it could have come from a disturbed burial, but we don't know any more about it. And Wendy has said, will it be displayed at a future date? Possibly. We haven't yet got round to thinking about that, because it's only fairly recently come into the museum, as in the last couple of months. Right, the next thing is a teacup. As you can see, it says Market Cross Devises. Quite fun. And on the back, it's got the Ruth Pierce story, which of course is on the Market Cross. Let's get from my notes, which talks about how Ruth Pierce, together with two other women, travelled from Potterne to Devizes to buy a sack of corn at the market. It was going to be split 3 ways, and each was to pay their fair share. One of the women found, who was collecting quotas, found that there was something missing, and asked Ruth to make up the amount of money. Ruth said she'd paid her full share, and she wished she might drop dead if she had not. She rashly repeated this awful wish when, to the dismay of the person standing by, she instantly fell down dead, having concealed the money she was supposed to have paid in her hand. So it's a very familiar story to those of us in Devizes. But what's quite fun as well, and this is why we brought it out, is, can you see at the bottom, it says where are we? Titherley's devises. So Titherley's was a glass and china shop in St John Street, which opened in 1861 and closed in 1988. I don't know if anyone remembers Titherley's. I have to say, I hadn't actually heard of it as a shop name previously, so I don't know if we've got any photos of it of the shop in the collection, which would be quite fun. And here's a really good specimen of Lisa's wrapping. I don't know how she does it. I really don't. So this is a pewter inkwell donated by John Girvan, and perhaps you can see it's got a nice label at the bottom. It says, "From Wilts County Assize Court, saved by John Girvan of Devizes in 2004." So he's written about it in his book, Doing Time. And I don't know if you remember, we sell a Christmas card about the Assize Court. And in the front of it, you'll actually, I ought to go and fetch one. I should have fetched one. On his drawing of the Assize Court, if you look, there's a skip, and in the skip that he's drawn is this inkwell, because he was passing the Assize Court and things were being chucked into a skip, and he managed to rescue it. It was all bent and in really poor condition, so he's smartened it up. And you might be able to see, let's see if we can touch the light. I need to just tilt the camera a minute. You might be able to see where it says County of Wilts. And this was used by the recorder, so or the clerk of the court. So this would be used by this was used by the clerk, who would be writing down an account of the trial, and particularly what the punishments were going to be and what that was being handed down. There would have been a glass inkwell inside it, but that sadly has disappeared. And the holes to take quills or pens. It's really quite fun. And on that theme, I want to show the ring light. I hope you can see that. So this is a framed portrait of Alfred James Underwood, who is, we have the description on the back. He was the chief warder of Devizes prison. So Alfred was born in 1843, and it's thought the portrait may have been painted by one of the prisoners, and it was donated by his great-grandson. According to family legend, Alfred died at 41 from a disease he caught while working at the prison. He left behind a wife and 8 children, which is quite good going. In the museum, we've also got a cell door from the prison in the Story of Devices gallery. So it was built. The prison was built on sort of a circular design called the Panopticon, and was called the County House of Corrections. And this, the way it was operated was that the warders could be in the centre and keep an eye and see everything that was happening around them, and that they wouldn't know whether they were actually being watched or not. So although the warder couldn't physically observe all the cells at the same time, the inmates wouldn't know whether they were being looked at or not. So they had to act as though they were always being watched. At least that was the theory. The door itself is made of larch with a metal plate laminated between the wood. The door was rescued when the prison was closed and demolished in 1921, and in 1973 found in Keyville, set into a garden wall. It was then John fitted it into the canal forge, where it remained until he gave it to the museum. On the inside, there's graffiti. There are 2 names, G. White and Peter Willis. So we don't know anything about them yet, but I'm sure someone someday will find out more about them. And of course, you'll remember that there was a TV program about the Devizes prison. What's it called? The Great British Dig. And the funny thing about that was that we told them about this portrait, but they and also the prison, the cell door, but they didn't want to know because they wanted the program to be about the excavation and the discovery rather than being sort of a fuller account of the prison. The other thing is that there is film of the demolition that is on the website of the British Pathé. That's the news. What's it called? Yeah, Pathé News, which was shown in the cinemas, and so there's footage of the prison being demolished again, which they didn't want to use because that would imply that we knew exactly where the prison was, which at least John Girvan certainly did. It'd be too easy. On to the next. So this is a child's toy with the pendulum underneath, and can you see it makes the birds, as you swing it around, the birds peck at the seed in the center, and you can see it's in the shape of a clover leaf. Now the colors are a bit amusing. Does it look like camouflage? The answer is yes, and the reason is this was made by a prisoner of war, a German prisoner of war, we're told, and was given to and it was given to the donor, the person who gave it to us, who was then aged 3. It was given the toy by his father, who had bought it from a POW. So the POW was they were making toys and then selling them to make a bit of cash. The colours come from their standard issue War Department paint, so it would have been easy to get. And the wood looks as though it's fairly poor quality. It looks as though they may have come from a packing case or something like that. But at the same time, you can see it's been made with great care and attention. I love the way that the wings are depicted and the V of the tail of the birds. Absolutely fascinating. So this comes from Prison of War. This comes from, where are we? West Ashton. And the donor thought that it was likely that the POW came from the prison of war camp in Devizes, but there was one also in Westbury, which is probably more likely because West Ashton is just a couple of miles away from Westbury, so that seems rather more likely. So the one at the camp at Devizes was also quite a short-term camp in the sense that it was used to sort the German prisoners of war. They were graded as to what the sort of what the threat of them was. So many of the prisoners of war were sort of were little more than boys. Others were older men and they really hadn't. They were just dragooned in. They had no choice. Whereas what they were trying to do at Devizes was sort out the real hardliners, the SS, for example, and the ones that were regarded as, well, they were given different grades. So white prisoners were those that were perfectly okay and could be kept in reasonably low security camps. Grey were a bit dodgy, and they would be sent to slightly higher security camps, and they would have a fairly short denazification program. The black ones were the hardliners. They were sent up to Scotland, and they had a full denazification program to make sure that they weren't going to cause any trouble. And of course, at Devizes there was one of the very few breakouts happened. And on the chat, my PC, I'm not quite sure, I can't remember the name, says, I have a toy similar to that one. My father worked at the POW camp, and as a child, I often went on to the camp. Wow. Was that, would you like, if you want, you could unmute your microphone, at least I think you can, and sort of tell us a bit more about that. Oh, yes, it looks though do I have to unmute? I've asked you to unmute, I think. Can you tell us which prisoner of war camp your father worked at and which one you went to? No, perhaps not. Okay, but that's fascinating. And just a reminder also, we also have a toy submarine, which definitely was made by a prisoner of war from the Devizes camp and was given to a young boy in who was living in Swindon, because the POWs were being taken to Swindon to build this word, not prefabricated houses. That's right. I've got just a couple more things to show you. This is the first. This is the last object, and this is the bit of the. Oh, right. And my PC says he doesn't have a microphone at the present. The camp was on the north side of the London Road. Yep. So the one here in Devizes. I'd be fascinated to hear more about that. We have a number of people who contact us from Germany or other people whose family were at the prisoner of war camp. Now, this might be a little surprising when I finally get it open. So this is Ramsbury alcohol and sanitizer. So this came from the Ramsbury brewery. Like many other breweries, when the COVID struck, they were sort of mid-brew and couldn't go back into the brewery, and they ended up with a very strong alcoholic content beer. And so what they did was make hand sanitizer for during the COVID pandemic. So we collected this as an example of sort of local ingenuity and innovation, and as a part of the story of COVID and the impacts that it had. So I have to say we're a bit worried about this because it's fine at the moment. I don't think it's got a sell-by date. Oh, yes, no, it doesn't. It's got Lisa's number on the bottom, but that's not the same thing as a sell-by date. But this is made of plastic, and we are not sure about how long plastics will last. And as it still has the alcoholic hand sanitizer in it, that adds another little complication. So I know Lisa's keeping an eye on this and one or two other plastic items, particularly the ones we collected during COVID, because it could be that we can't keep them for all time in the way that we can some of the, for example, many of the archaeological objects. So we collected quite a few things during COVID. We kept testing kits, and also you may remember the snakes that people made, where they took pebbles and painted them. So we collected a sample of stones from one of the snakes that was by the Quakers Walk estate as a sample, because it's I'm not sure we really want to we get very enthusiastic about the idea of displaying things relating to COVID just at the moment. I think it's a time we'd rather forget in many ways. But the time will come when these things become really fascinating, when we sort of look at the 25th or 50th anniversary of COVID. And we do have a program of collecting things that do represent life in Wiltshire today. That's really a very good example. Also, an example of some of the problems that we face in terms of how to look after things into the future. So that's it for objects. It's just a couple of last things, which are some watercolors. And my colleague Karen has been doing some work on these. So really quite interesting. So these were sent to us by a gentleman in France. Let me get the links from Karen. Yep. And these are pictures of watercolours of Stanton St Quintin, which of course is on the road between Malmesbury and Chippenham. So I think there's about 20 watercolours. Let me just check if Karen's on the call. I don't think she is. No, I'm trying to persuade her to do a call one day to do a bit more about this, because she knows all the detail. But you can see here the watercolour at the top. The church at the bottom. And you'll see that there are initials, so that's G.J. Coates, and they're both G.J. Coates. Now, we didn't know who that was, and he didn't know anything about the artists. But the vicar at Stanton St Quintin was Charles Gray Coates, who was vicar between 1801 and 1866. Oh, that's his years. He was born in 1801, died in 1866. He took up the living at Stanton St Quintin in 1826 and remained there till he died. He married Fanny Henrietta Piggott in 1839. They had 8 children between 1840 and 51. But the dates and initials don't match the signatures on the paintings. So Karen has done some detective work and realized that suggesting that the GF one is that belongs to Georgiana Frances Coates. She was baptized in 1810 in Shropshire, and in 1831 she was presented at court to William IV and Queen Adelaide by her mother Lady Maria Coates. In 1833, she's reported as attending the King's birthday and Queen's drawing room. So she was obviously extremely well connected. And the event was also attended by the then Princess Victoria, obviously, who became Queen Victoria. In 1843, she married the Reverend John Brooke at St George's, Hanover Square in London. He was curate and vicar of Shifnal in Shropshire, and then he inherited Horton Hall in Shifnal on the death of his brother, George. And then she, where are we? Then she had two sons, John Townsend, born in 1844, and Charles, born in 1846. Sadly, Georgiana died shortly after Charles's birth, and she's buried at Shifnal. And at the time, Charles was just 18 days old. So that's probably the painter of these pictures, and she's obviously a very cultured lady. A lot of care and attention has gone into this. Look at the detail in the decoration of the Norman arch of the church, and the figures are really quite fun. And the dress does date them to this sort of period. So that's one, and I'll show you the second one as well. Bear in mind there are about 20 of them. It was a really nice, fine, wonderful thing to have arrive in the post from France. We'll come to that one in a moment. The top picture is labelled "Barn given to the Reverend Coates as for the site of school," and its date, and it's G.J. Coates again, 1835, which is pretty quite nice. I must get. We'll have to see if I think the school at Stanton St Quintin is still there. So this was the barn that was on the site given to the vicar, so he could found a school, which is for 1835 is very progressive. The other one is really quite bizarre. This time, if you see the name, it's S.H. Coates, so it's not Georgiana. And the inscription on it says "a potato," and it's dated 1829. Gorgeous potato, rather full of knobbly bits. And it's Karen has found that that this could belong to, or could have been painted by Selina Henrietta Coates, who was baptized in 1809 at Sheriff Hales in Shropshire. Like Georgiana, she also attended the King's birthday and Queen's drawing room in May 1833 with Lady Louisa Jenkinson. And the question is, did she visit her brother at Stanton together with Georgiana on their way to and from the event? Because this is 1829. Not sure that works, but there's more to that story that Karen is working on. She married William Rodham of Rodham Hall. Again, she married in St George's, Hanover Square, very fashionable. And once again, Charles Grey Coates officiated at the marriage of his sister. So absolutely fascinating stories coming out of these. And as I say, Karen is working on this to see what more she can find. And I think this will be the subject of a future talk, and certainly an article in Trilithon, if not in WAM. So, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to that one. So that's. I hope you found that interesting. That was just a small selection of some of the objects that we have come to the museum, and as you can see, there's all these amazing stories. And it's sometimes really frustrating that we can't sort of put everything on display. That's one of the reasons we're so glad to have the new cases for the long room, because we can start to put some things out for short periods. Something like these watercolors, they can't be on display for very long because the UV light will make the colors deteriorate. But at the same time, we want to be able to share them as well. So I think that's it from me. Very happy if anyone wanted to ask any sort of more general questions about how we look after the collections or anything like that, be very happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll just say thank you and good night. Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Janice. And the question is, would you be interested in hearing more things, more like this? I should have asked that before people started signing off, shouldn't I? So Jill says yes. Well, that's one. And Catherine says do repeat. Oh, good. Glad to hear that. Yep. Okay, some good votes there. Yes, please. Once a month. God, what do you think we're made of? Interesting. You may have, I said right at the very start, perhaps while we were just chatting, that we draw up a list of recent acquisitions for the board, who meet basically once every 3 months or so. So perhaps we might tie it in with that. Then we've got a nice sort of group of things to talk about. Yeah, closer look at the details. I wonder if we can think of a. Maybe I should get. Just remember, you can get cameras. There were some microscopes that run on that run off a USB port. So I could do that, which would allow us to look at things in much more detail. That's a good idea. Thank you, Motorola Moto G13, whoever that is. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Good night.